Welcome back, and really quite an honor to have with us today somebody that I really admire and certainly encourage him to do what he's doing, and that is Pastor Lucas Miles. He is now the Senior Director of Turning Point USA Faith. He's also the host of Church and State with Lucas Miles, which is on Epoch TV. He's also the best-selling author of Woke Jesus and Pagan Threat, Confronting America's Godless Uprising. He's an ordained minister. He served as the lead pastor there at Influence Church in Indiana, and he's the president of Influence Network. And his commentaries has been seen on Fox News, Newsmax, The Blaze, and The Washington Times. There's a picture of the cover of the book. By the way, this book is getting amazing reviews. I have seen it posted all over social media as a must-read, Pagan Threat by Lucas Miles. He does have a website, lucasmiles.org, and there's the picture of that landing page as well. Well, Lucas, good to see you, buddy. How are you?
Hey, I am doing well. It's good to see you, Perry. I appreciate you.
Thank you, thank you. First of all, your position there at Turning Point, tell us about that.
Yeah, so I'm the Senior Director of TPUSA Faith. I oversee all the faith operations within kind of the broader Turning Point ecosystem here. And I've been honored to serve in this role for about 18 months now underneath the leadership of Charlie Kirk. It was an honor in my life to serve him. I miss him dearly. He left us a roadmap, and we're going to continue following that of really, seeking to unite the church around primary doctrine, to defeat wokeism, and to really become a trusted voice, for the American church when it comes to just issues of the gospel today and how they interact with culture. So I'm here in Phoenix right now at our headquarters, and we've got a great team, a great staff. Obviously, still a lot of grief that we're operating through, but there's a lot of resolve, behind that's driving us forward.
Wow. Maybe you personally, but I think also throughout the globe, what do you think the death of Charlie Kirk's impact has been?
I don't think, first off, that any of us could have really imagined this. I mean, obviously, there's always, we've known that people, hated Charlie, and there was always the crazies out there that would, say all these extreme things, and there were so many precautions that were taken. But the world changed on September 10th. It's a different place. I'm a different person, honestly, after that event. I think that we're still figuring out exactly what that looks like and what this really means. Charlie was one of the greatest men that I've ever known. He's 15 years younger than me, but I looked up to him in so many ways. He was a great leader to follow, great boss to work for. I developed a friendship with him before I ever worked here. I've been on the team, as I mentioned, about 18 months, but I've known him since 2020. But Charlie has now really become an icon. He has his message, his work. He did so much throughout his life, but I think he has done even more, and God's used it even more in his death. Certainly, I don't believe it was God's will to see him, his life snuffed out like this. But what the enemy intends for bad, God's going to use for good. And there's a tremendous revival that's taking place on the other side of this. And I believe we're just starting to see the beginning of that. And I think it's our job. We can't make revival happen, but we can steward it. And so we're trying at TPUSA Faith, and I think our churches we work with as well, we're trying to keep this revival going just by, really being faithful and obedient to the Lord and stewarding this season well that we're in.
When these kind of tragedies hit, there's a saying, we never get over it, but in time we do get through it. And you said it forever changed you. Can you share that with us?
Yeah, I think the Sunday after Charlie was killed, I was at my home church, and I've been going kind of nonstop traveling since then. I've probably done 250 media appearances, in the last 60 days. We just haven't stopped. And Charlie looked for and developed gladiators. That's when if you want to understand the thing that is Turning Point USA. Charlie just brought in, he was such a good judge of character. He brought, my colleagues here, they're amazing. And they are they are outworking and outpacing, I think, anybody around because they believe in the mission that much and they know what's at stake. And I think now we know what's at stake more than ever before. And that first Sunday at church, I remember I went up on the stage and I said, look, I'm a new guy. You've never met this guy before. Any sort of amount of people pleasing in me, I think, died that day. If they're, it framed fully what matters, what's important, what's at stake, the true fight that we're in, good versus evil. Um, and, I mean, it could have been any one of us that could have been there. But Charlie represented all of us in that way. And I think that, we saw before our eyes the loss of the greatest martyr of in recent history that I can ever remember. And there will never be another Charlie Kirk. It's going to take every single one of us to kind of fill those shoes that he left behind. But the thing that I just keep coming back to is now's the time for us to be. I can't be Charlie Kirk, but I can be the best Lucas Miles of this generation. You can be the best Perry Atkinson of this generation, and I think that that's what we need right now.
Well said, Lucas. Is Turning Point moving on with college appearances?
Yeah, Turning Point. Honestly, it is more exciting than probably ever before. I think all of us just the grieving of just wishing Charlie was here to see this. We know he's with the Lord. He's looking down and cheering us on. In that great cloud of witnesses. The numbers of chapters that we've had come in, pastors, just my pastor department has gone from 4,000 pastors to 8,000 pastors. We had 200,000 individuals write us and say, how can I be a part of TPUSA Faith? We've had requests for high school chapters, college chapters, homeschool chapters, in the tens and tens of thousands. And it's been overwhelming, the groundswell of support that we've seen. So the mission is clear. The work is I think in front of us. It's going to take a lot of effort to get this done, but we're built for it. Charlie, I think in many ways was preparing us all for this moment. We didn't know it. Whenever he would get around pastors, we do pastor summits together, and he'd always go, hey, I'm not a pastor. You're the pastors. You guys are the pastors. And, what I've said is that I don't think that I'm not sure he even realized it. And I know that we didn't see it at the time, but I think in many ways, Charlie was pastoring all of us and preparing us for this moment that we're in. And I think we just all want to make him proud and really do this for him. And ultimately, even more so do it for the Lord.
Lucas, much has been written about, and even research has shown that young men are coming to faith, and that Charlie was a real attraction to young men. Are you sensing that in the organization?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen for some time just a major move among young men, specifically Gen Z men, towards leaning, pushing them more towards conservative ideas. I think we have to continue to steward that. I think that Charlie was a major constant in that way. When you have somebody who's so prominent, whose life is stolen in this way, it makes a very big impact. And I think that, although Charlie isn't here physically to keep his voice going, he was probably the most filmed person in human history. I mean, we have literally probably, thousands of hours of unreleased footage, from him that will come out from these different events that will, drip out over time. And people are going to be hearing Charlie Kirk's voice, for a very, very long time. And I think that for, the young men that were following him, and probably even some that were just on the fringes that kind of checked him out periodically, but, weren't maybe fully, didn't know where they landed on some of these issues. I think that there's been an inspiration that's happened where people have seen what took place. They saw how he was violently, murdered in front of all of us. And I think that has created an even deeper resolve. I mean, we have people showing up to church for the first time, saying, I just bought a Bible. I've never been to church, but I used to watch Charlie Kirk, and, I want to, take this more seriously now. And I think that that's a trend that we're seeing across the country in churches across America. And I think that it's a great time, to really, for the sake of the gospel, utilize this moment that again, the enemy intended for evil, to bring great revival and a great winning of souls, into the kingdom.
So beautifully said. All right, let me take a break. I want to talk about your book. Let me say to our viewers and listeners, check out Lucas's website. lucasmiles.org is the website. And the book that is now getting just really great reviews, Pagan Threat. We'll talk about that when we come back. Welcome back, and an honor to have with us today Pastor Lucas Miles. He's the Senior Director of the Turning Point USA Faith. He's also hosts the Church and State program with Lucas Miles, and he wrote a book that has really gotten amazing reviews. It's called The Pagan Threat. In fact, the last 2 weeks, it's the best-selling book on the New York Times, and there's a picture of the cover of the book on the screen there. You can check out Lucas's website, lucasmiles.org. Lucas, you and I briefly have talked about this book, but it has really taken off. And first of all, congratulations, but you've touched a nerve. And what do you think that nerve is?
You know, I think that people are aware, I think right now more than ever, of there is a growing, this ominous threat to our way of life here in America. You know, we're seeing this in the New York election that's taking place. We're seeing this in the assassination of Charlie Kirk. We're seeing this on our college campuses. We're seeing this, you know, in the homes. We're seeing this among young people, the confusion around, you know, sex and gender and everything else that's happening. And so, but I think that where people have struggled is they haven't been able to really fully understand how we got here or why. And so what I try to do in this book is really show that paganism has evolved. It's shown its true color. Excuse me, that wokeism has evolved and shown its true colors, and they are in fact pagan. And there is an intentional supplanting attempt to supplant the Christian gospel in this nation, our Christian worldview, and to replace that with a pagan worldview so that Marxist ideology can be embraced. This is not just about that paganism in general is a threat. I don't think paganism right now is big enough by itself to be a threat, but it is the intentional sort of gelatinous melting pot that is paganism, Marxism, LGBT agenda, as well as now the rise of Islam, that are sort of working together to supplant a Christian worldview and a Western way of life in this nation. And I believe that is the threat that we are seeing, and that's really why I wrote this book.
Does that include Judaism?
Is Judaism a threat?
No. Anti-Semitism being a part of the pagan rise.
Yeah, so I think that what we're seeing right now is an attempt to kind of wipe out anything that speaks to the God of the Bible, whether Old Testament or New Testament. So, you know, obviously, and, you know, we have the whole conversation about Israel is obviously much broader than we could probably fully cover today. But, you know, this is something that we have been pushed into these different viewpoints, villainizing people of faith, specifically of the faith of the worship of Yahweh, and to replace that with some other alternative view. And so this is, you know, I deal with that a little bit in the book, but I think this topic of Israel is a much bigger topic that most people are stumbling through right now, and I don't think have very good answers. And the conversation is way too binary, and it's what's causing many people, I think, to fall into deception today, and you know, to support this rise of anti-Semitism.
Yeah. All right. So how can we resist paganism if we don't understand what it is?
Yeah. So basically, on a broad stroke level, paganism is the worship or the searching for divine or divinity or the deity or you know, some sort of enlightenment in anything other than the God of the Bible. You know, more classically, we think of paganism in things like the occult or witchcraft or the worship of, you know, Greek gods or Nordic gods or something like that. We have things like shamanism, you know, and Wicca, earth worship. You know, we see those are probably more classical views of paganism. You know, G.K. Chesterton, right, it wrote in the early 1900s that paganism was dead. I think that C.S. Lewis would have affirmed that. But, you know, what we've seen is that it's really revitalized. There's been this intentional reviving of paganism. What I'd say in the book is that this is not just an organic revival like what we saw after the assassination of Charlie Kirk in the church, where people just organically, moved by the Spirit of God, showed up to church the next week. But this is a bought and paid for revival, where networks and cartoons and you know, movie scripts and news stations and all these things, authors are kind of working in concert together to push an agenda on the American people in order to be able to kind of demoralize society, to get us to the point to where we will start embracing Marxist talking points and Marxist, you know, ideologies. And I don't think that as long as Christianity remains an anchor in this nation, Marxism cannot be accepted because they're antithetical to one another. But if you can supplant Christianity and push it aside, now all of a sudden this Marxist worldview, starts to look more attractive, and it doesn't. The moral rigidity of Judaism or Christianity are not in the way to that prevent us from being able to accept some of the the painting outside of the lines that Marxism offers.
Hours after 9/11, New Yorkers said, "We'll never forget." Today, they're on the verge of forgetting. Literally electing somebody that supports the ideology that attacked the city. What's your take?
Look, when you have immigration policies like what we have, when you have no restraint, you allow foreign ideas to come in without assimilation. I'm pro-immigration, assuming we have a plan for assimilation. But when you look at the Old Testament, you see how Israel handled, what was known as foreigners or sojourners that came into their land. There was three different types. There were those who were, coming just for a short period of time to do some business and leave. They were treated with respect, but they didn't have the rights of a citizen. There were those that came for the purpose of assimilating and basically saying, like Ruth, may your God be my God, may your people be my people. And that's what you want anytime immigration is taking place. You want that heart behind it. Otherwise, they should not be given these rights. And then thirdly, there were those that came in with the purpose of causing harm, of bringing some sort of damage to the state. And those were, kept at arm's length. They were protected against, they were fenced off. And so, we have lost sight of this in all of the talk of, empathy and Jesus was an immigrant type of, leftist progressive talking points. We have lost sight of, I think, wisdom and logic when it comes to actually, protecting our borders. I think what you're seeing in New York is the start of that problem. But we're going to have a lot more issues like this if we don't wake up and realize really what's at stake.
How can, say, pastors, church leaders prepare their congregations to understand this undercurrent of paganism?
Look, I have probably more frustration right now with the average pastor in America than I do with most people. I think that in many ways that we've been part of the problem, and pastors who have hidden behind this talking point of we just preach Jesus, we don't talk about politics here. They have allowed society to get to where it is today. Our job as pastors, and I'm still a pastor, I still have a church I preach in every single week, that it is our job to preach the full counsel of the Word of God. What this means is we take the scriptures and we address the issues of the day so that our people can think biblically at the dining room table, in the family room, in the bedroom, at the ballot box, at the schoolhouse, at the state house. And right now we have a whole generation of people who have been taught a bunch of spiritual fluff. And the whole time they've never been actually taught how to think biblically and how to work through the issues of the day and how to see these things. And so pastors have to get in the fight. This is whether we're talking paganism, Islam, Marxism. I think the average pastor in America, and this is certainly a bit of an indictment. It's going to sound like that, and I think it is that the average pastor in America has been lazy, and they have not done their homework. They've not learned about these things. They're still living off of whatever they learned at Bible college. They've not grown with the times. They don't understand the times, and it's time to get in the fight. And Charlie was so good at that. He was like that voice, that came to Gideon saying, when he was hiding in the wine press, "Rise up, you mighty valiant warrior. It's time." We need the pastors in this nation to hear the Lord say to them, it's time to get in the fight. And it's your job to prepare your people to stand against every single evil and act of unrighteousness in this nation.
I only got 2 minutes left. I'm sorry, but I'll get you back. But the Pagan Threat outlines a final battle plan. Can you give it to us quickly?
Yeah. I'll give you at least a little taste of it. So in the book, I kind of work through the problems and the history of how we got to where we are, deal a lot with first wave feminism and some different, ideologies that crept in. But ultimately, I have a 7-step plan for the church, for pastors, for parents, conservatives, grandparents out there on what we could do about this. And it starts with a return to primary doctrine. We have to come back to really defining what are the basic tenets of the Christian faith, and let's unify around those and help circle the wagon, of unity in the church. Secondly, we have to really leverage technology. You know, the average pastor in America is 57 years old. If we expect to reach this next generation, we have to go to where they are. And they are, you know, using technology. It's TikTok Live and X Spaces and gaming chat rooms and, you know, virtual reality and, you know, all these different things. And we have to start creating specific intentional strategies to reach people with the gospel, you know, in the digital space. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to get them. This is the COVID generation. They grew up in isolation. They were, you know, in their mom's basements and missed their proms and their graduations. And we have to do a lot more work to reach them for the gospel right now.
All right. The book is entitled Pagan Threat. Let me encourage you. You can get this online. And right now is for 2 weeks in a row, then the best-selling book there at the New York Times. So you may want to check this out. Pagan Threat by Lucas Miles. Check out Lucas's website, lucasmiles.org. There's a picture of that landing page. Pray for him as he not only pastors a church, but works closely and firsthand with Turning Point USA. Miles, you're a blessing, friend. Thank you. You give us time when we call, and I honor it. So thank you so much, bud.